poor eating habits increase the risk of cancer. Changing these is our best chance at preventing up to 50% of cancer. Sometimes, though,
Today's world is facing increasing crises, from the COVID-19 pandemic to supply chain disruptions, rising prices, slowing economies. Let's not forget the Russia-Ukraine conflict and now monkeypox. Here in the OECS, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank forecasts growth of 6.7% for 2022. A downward revision is likely, though, given the global realities. These times demand sound strategic planning, inclusive decision-making, and action. The peoples of the region, and perhaps more so, the governments of the region, are in need of guidance, and I dare say a little hand-holding, and even a bitter pill, one or two, to see us through. Here to do just that is a man who has proven himself sharp, steady, plain talking, and in a region where eyes frequently cast up to the skies, especially when pressures mount, he is unapologetic in faith. I welcome Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Timothy N.J. Antoine, to a conversation of hard truth, but of hope. Governor, welcome to Saint Lucia. I know it has been a busy time for you, and welcome to the studios of the DBS Television.
Thank you very much, Lisa. It's my great pleasure to be back in Saint Lucia and happy to join you this evening for this conversation.
Yeah, you have been on the ground making the rounds as part of the 2022 country outreach mission, and that follows on from the 102nd meeting of the Monetary Council. And we saw our very own Prime Minister, Honorable Philip J. Pierre, assuming the chairmanship of the council. How has the rounds that you've been making going? I know you met with the cabinet of ministers, you met with the opposition, the business sector, youth, as well as the clergy. So what has that been like?
Very, very engaging conversations. So as you rightly said, last Friday, the Prime Minister of Saint Lucia, Honorable Philip J. Pierre, assumed the chairmanship of the Monetary Council. Prime Minister Pierre will be chairman until July of 2023. So that was our first order of business. Immediately following the handover, we had a very successful meeting, 102nd meeting, as you alluded. And then this week, we have been engaged in some very direct conversations with key stakeholders in St. Lucia. As you said, the cabinet of ministers, the leader of the opposition and his team, members of the social partners, which include business, civil society, labor unions, of course, youth, churches, and other stakeholders, bankers, members of the media, and earlier today also the OECS Commission. So it's been quite engaging, very direct. When we do these outreach missions, we basically have two objectives. One is to share our perspectives on the performance and prospects of the currency union, and in particular in this case St. Lucia. So we go country specific. And secondly, to listen, to hear from the stakeholders, the people we serve, the citizens and residents of the currency union. What are their views on what we're doing and how we may have a better service, how we may help to advance the transformation agenda, which for us is really, really key. So a lot of what we do at the ECCB for the people of the region is really about transformation. And so those meetings have gone extremely well. People have been very free and forthcoming in sharing their views on how they see the situation, their views on what the bank is doing, and suggestions for what they would like the bank to look at going forward.
And certainly, as I said, the times demand this. Now, the cost of the pandemic, it is ongoing. And, we've gone through 2-3 years, if you will, of it right now. How would you, what's the quantitative cost for us within the ECCU? Do we have that?
Well, it's huge. So I don't know that we have a fully compiled comprehensive assessment. We do have some assessment. In economic terms, the first pointer really is the contraction of the economy in 2020. We had in the ECCU the largest contraction on record of 17%. In the case of Saint Lucia, the contraction was 24%. And you may ask, well, why did Saint Lucia contract even more than the ECCU? And that is because Saint Lucia is not just the largest economy in the ECCU, but is the most tourism dependent. And so, obviously, tourism was shut for a period. That really hurt us. So essentially, in that year, Saint Lucia lost $1 billion, roughly, in GDP. And you have to recover that over time. So last year, for example, the economy here grew in Saint Lucia by about 12.2%. This year, we project it will grow by about 10%. But as you can see, recovering, but we're still not back to 2019 levels. And that will take us a little while longer. But I will say, St. Lucia has rebounded very well in tourism. Frankly spoken, even faster than we had initially envisaged, which is a good thing. But in quantitative terms, we're talking about, in the case of St. Lucia, $1 billion just like that. And across the currency union, obviously, that figure is even higher. But beyond the economic is the social side. Education loss. I mean, we lost students during this pandemic in terms of their education, their learnings, their outcomes. And some of these students are still to be found. And in many cases, where they have been found, there's significant work now to recover that learning loss. Then there's the social issues like depression, which we know has been on the rise. Anecdotally, we know more and more people have had to seek psychological, psychosocial support, counseling and so on, to help them through what has been a very difficult period. Businesses, if you're in business and you put everything you had into the business, your life, your heart, your soul, and then you've lost the business or the business is on life support, these are very hard times. So I don't want to reduce the impact of the pandemic simply to economics. I think an economistic view will be simplistic and, frankly speaking, far well short of what in fact is a comprehensive impact on our region. And I think we're still assessing that, and will be for some time.
But what we can't escape here in St. Lucia, as well as across the ECCU, rising deficits as a result of the COVID pandemic, contraction in economic activity, and of course resulting on public debts.
Yes.
So the Monetary Council in February of last year made the decision to extend the debt target of 60% of GDP from 2030, that's what you had set, and you extended it to 2035. Can you explain to us the rationale for that and the effects of doing so?
Right, so let me just step back just to help create some context for that decision. At the end of 2019, so the debt to GDP ratio target, as you said, it's 60%, you're correct. At the end of 2019, on average in the currency union, we were at 65%. And we were trending in the right direction. A country like St. Kitts and Nevis and Grenada were already under 60%. And others were moving towards the 60. Then came the pandemic. And in one fell swoop, with that contraction of 17%, the debt to GDP ratio dramatically rose to 87%. 87, from 65 to 87. So it became very apparent that there was no way for our governments to realistically, most of them, meet that target by 2030 when tourism is our lead sector and needed to recover. And the view was that not only does tourism need to recover, but the fiscal needs to recover. Because at that time, I mean, at the height of the pandemic, revenues in Saint Lucia and in other countries were cut by almost half. Government revenues. Governments were not collecting and at the same time trying to offer safety nets to cushion the effect on the poor and the vulnerable, both households and businesses. So the view of the Monetary Council is made up of finance ministers, most of whom are prime ministers, was that we needed time, and that was the view of the ECCB as well, advising the Monetary Council to allow us to, one, have come out of the pandemic, two, have tourism recover, and then begin to get the fiscal back together. And so on that basis, we made a very deliberate and considered decision to move that target from 2030 to 2035. And that is why that decision was made.
Right. So what's the roadmap then to debt sustainability for us against that background?
So it varies by country because we're not all at the same point. I mean, in Saint Lucia right now, the debt to GDP ratio is about 90%. Obviously, as the economy recovers, it will, hopefully that number will come down. So it depends on where the country is at. For some countries, you have to do more fiscal adjustment than others. Fiscal adjustment simply means you either have to raise revenue or cut expenditure or a combination of both to be able to get your fiscal house in order. It may also mean looking at your debt and looking at the profile of the debt. It could also mean taking higher cost debt and replacing it with lower cost debt. So there are a number of instruments to get to fiscal and debt sustainability. And it's a journey. Frankly, it's a marathon, not a sprint. But we have to start where we are and work assiduously. So what we said to our governments is that you need to set interim targets. To get to 60 by 2035, you need to sort of set targets of maybe 2025, where you want to be, 2028, 2030, 2032, 2035. Now, all of this, while with a full understanding that the shocks keep coming. I mean, we could get hit by another hurricane, God forbid. That's the last thing we want right now. But I mean, when you are making these plans, you also have to recognize that shocks may come, will come, and therefore, one of the reasons we encourage the governments to put their fiscal houses in order is to give them some fiscal space to respond to a natural disaster or a shock. To do what we call counter-cyclical fiscal policy, which is a big word to simply say, when things are hard, the government should be able to spend more. But to spend more, you have to have the money to do that. You have to have the space. You have to have the fiscal room to do that. Unfortunately, Saint Lucia does not have a lot of room at this point in time. That's not a secret. So it has to rebuild reserves over time, and that requires a very diligent effort. And it's not made easier by the fact that as we speak, the government of Saint Lucia, the people of Saint Lucia, the people of the ECCB, and frankly the world, we are all grappling with inflation. A simple example is what we see with the 20-pound cylinder. It's a simple example. At the moment, that is $43 to St. Lucians. But the government is subsidizing that by $22. It therefore means that if the government were to not do the subsidy, St. Lucians would be paying $65 for that 20-pound cylinder. So that again is hurting the government revenues. So I'm simply saying all of that to say a plan is required, a credible plan, and it has to be worked over time because you're not going to get to that target overnight. And what we say is to set interim targets and work assiduously towards those.
I mentioned
and it's not easy. I'm not suggesting it's easy, but that's the work we have to do.
Because I mentioned in the opening about possible bitter pills, one or two.
Yes.
So in terms of, would you recommend that the government of St. Lucia and the rest of the ECCU, that they look at self-imposed adjustment programs, if you will?
So I think...
As opposed to the prescribed.
Well, I think at the end of the day, the best adjustment is an orderly adjustment. And the best adjustment is not just an orderly adjustment, but in an adjustment that you determine and you lead and drive. That is the country. So we do encourage our countries always to consider designing homegrown programs of adjustment and seek external support where required from whatever source, whether that's the World Bank, the IMF, the Caribbean Development Bank, the other bilaterals. But to prepare for yourself a program, and that is the experience we have in the region. That's what Grenada did several years ago. Other countries have looked to design homegrown programs. But I think it has to start with an honest conversation about where we are, what the government can and cannot do, and the management of expectations. Because if government is being asked to do X, Y, and Z without the resources so to do, then basically it's a hiding to nothing. And I mean, we have to be honest and say the fiscal situation needs to improve. We're going to have to do the following. And there are ways successfully to make those adjustments. And there are experiences in the ECCU. So my view would be to look at the experiences around the ECCU and to learn from those and determine what makes sense for Saint Lucia.
You mentioned the subsidizing of fuel products, and we have food commodities that are being subsidized by the government.
That's correct.
How much longer, realistically, can this continue, given all of those external shocks that we're experiencing?
I wish I knew. The thing about it is that, as I said on Friday, the projection at the moment is that inflation will last for another year, possibly longer. Why we're not sure is because we do not know when the war in Ukraine will end. And when that war ends, there is still going to be a lag for the unraveling of the related sanctions. So, in the meantime, while that war is waged, major central banks around the world are attempting to get inflation under control. So Ukraine aggravates the situation, but we were already seeing inflation even before the war in Ukraine. Yeah. We have to be clear about that because of the supply chain disruptions occasioned by the pandemic. So the major central banks are now rapidly raising interest rates. Only today the Fed, which is the central bank of the United States, raised interest rates by another 75 basis points in an attempt to get inflation under control. It's at a 40-year high in the United States, currently over 9% year on year. So people have asked, so what can the central bank, ECCB, do about inflation? At least I'm afraid to say, unfortunately, nothing. Because the inflation that we are experiencing in the ECCU is imported inflation. That inflation comes from the United States and to a lesser extent Europe, which are our major trading partners. So our central bank is not raising interest rates because that will not do anything about inflation. We import. Most of what we consume, we import. Where do we import it from? Our trading partners, the United States, Europe, and to a lesser extent Trinidad and other Caribbean countries. So they have to get their inflation under control. And we have to, hope and pray that they get it under control as quickly as possible so that we could then have the benefit. Now, having said that, here's the other thing that we have to be concerned about. As these major central banks drive interest rates up to curb inflation, to get it down. Now, keep in mind, for most central banks, the target, certainly the United States Central Bank, the Fed, the target is 2%. They want inflation around 2%. Right now it's at 9%. They have to get it down. As the rates rise, it creates a dampening effect on the economy. And so you are already beginning to see a slowdown in the economy. Only yesterday, the IMF announced that it was downgrading the growth forecast for the global economy from 3.6% this year to 3.2%, and next year to 2.9%. And they may very well revise that down again. And they revise it. This is the third revision downwards for the year. So the point I'm making is that they are working to get it down. As they do that, there is a risk that we can now see a recession. The global economy, the US economy can slow so dramatically that we could end up with a recession. But the central banks, the major central banks, have reasoned that it is better to have, if it comes to that, a recession, hopefully short and shallow, than to keep prices where they are right now. Because the worry is that the longer prices stay high, the more entrenched inflation becomes. Because what you then have is a wage price spiral. Goods go up, labor unions demand more wages, workers, employers then say, I have to charge more for the goods because I have to pay my workers more, my labor costs are going up, 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 up. And we also know when prices go up, very often they don't come back down. They stick it downwards. So these are very challenging times for the global economy and for the major central banks. And could you imagine what it is for small states like ours? So these are the challenges that we're working through. So to answer your question, we do not know with certainty how long inflation will last. It is partly the efforts of these central banks, these major central banks, Europe, England, Bank of England, United States, the Fed, and also the war in Ukraine and related sanctions.
So what are our buffers in between now and when we will get that reprieve?
So the buffers are really a united approach, a meeting of the minds. So I think it starts there. Both the Prime Minister, Prime Minister Perry, new chairman, and myself called for an all-of-society approach, a coming together of the social partners. The way we see it is that everybody now has to come to the table with some shared sacrifice. So if the government says, we are cutting back our taxes or subsidizing by this amount, we are asking you to hold strain for the time being because of the efforts we are making. Businesses, you therefore cannot exploit the situation. And this is why I made a strong call for not to see price gouging at this time. I think it is unpatriotic and it's immoral for businesses to be trying to take advantage of the situation. So you need to have, as a starting point, a shared understanding of the situation. This is what I am doing. I am trying to hold this here. I need you to do this. If we go off and individually start to make these unilateral demands, then the situation will get even worse. Secondly, we have to say, at the level of the household, are there alternative consumption patterns or behavior that we need to pursue? We like to eat certain things. We import most of what we eat. Now is the time for us to rediscover some local stuff, which, by the way, are healthier, to help us through this time. Instead of flour, maybe it's farine. Instead of sugar, maybe it's honey. Instead of juice, maybe it's water. By the way, water is a great, great drink. I don't know if anybody ever realized that. I'm just saying, I kid you not, now is the time for us to make these adjustments, because at the household level, our budget only goes so far. So we have to decide, now maybe the time to say, you see this vegan thing? I want to try it for a little while. Well, maybe not every day, but maybe every other day. I'll skip meat. It will save me some money. It probably will help me with my health. Mm-hmm. And it certainly will help us in terms of managing at this time. I'm simply saying, this is not just about government. Government, business, labor, citizens and residents. We all have a part to play right now in this difficult challenge.
I can hear people saying, that's fine.
Yes.
Lots of people are making their adjustments on the personal level.
Mm-hmm.
But people also look to the government to make certain adjustments as well.
Yes.
And so if the public sees perhaps government isn't cutting on travel, for example,
mm-hmm.
and ministers are out of Ireland very often, people are not hearing
mm-hmm.
ministers taking salary cuts.
Mm-hmm.
While they in the private sector
mm-hmm.
have had salary cuts from the onset of COVID-19, not to be reinstated as yet. So is it not for the government as well to lead that call and show the populations that they're in it with them?
Absolutely. So the government has to lead, and I believe the governments are doing that. How that works out in individual countries is a matter for the countries. Clearly, you mentioned travel. Travel has to be managed. But I also have to say, especially with a new administration, you do have to make some contacts globally because you need help. So figure out what works. Where you can do virtual, you do virtual. But you do have to make some contacts. You have to get out there and fight for Saint Lucia and get in front of, key players and development partners, bilateral donors and so on, to get resources. If you have the connections already, it's easier because you're just basically leveraging an existing relationship. If you do not have those connections, or you have to reacquaint, then you have to make that effort. So you mentioned travel. I mean, it's just one example, but I will accept, or I will make the point that there is some travel required, as much as we try to minimize it at all levels, to get people out. Take us at ECCB, for example. We did not travel for 2 years. But I need to come to Saint Lucia and I need to face the people of Saint Lucia. I need to give them an account for my stewardship. I need to hear from them. Virtual can take you so far. But at this moment, after 2.5 years, I need to be here. That's part of my job. So I'm saying that to say, you're right, the government has to lead by example. What that looks like varies by country. And I think when you have that conversation around the table with everybody, those honest discussions take place and say, well, you're asking me to do that, but I need you to do that. I'm going to do that. What are you going to do? And you get a shared understanding of how this shared sacrifice would look like. So that is to be done, and that's urgent.
In Saint Lucia, recurrent expenditure for the government, so troubling. The cost of the public service, for example, don't take any offense. I know that you're the son of former public servants, but here
I see you've done your homework.
I do try, but believe we are the 40% or maybe even over 40% mark there.
It's over 50 right now.
It's over 50% right now. So. Yeah. How concerning is that for the ECCB?
Well, it's concerning for the government of Saint Lucia. I mean, the government of Saint Lucia is well aware of that. It's concerning for all of our governments because revenues are down, because you're making all of these adjustments, sacrifices, you're subsidizing. At the same time, you have to pay salaries and pensions and everything on time. So I know that's a concern for the government of Saint Lucia, as it should be. What I will say is, at this moment, what I think more than anything else people want to see is the public service take its game to another level. In other words, raise your game, public servants, all of us, in this period of time. So, for example, when we met with the social partners yesterday, issue of government bureaucracy was raised. It takes too long to get certain things done. We're paying you. We want to see things happen faster. We did a business outlook survey, as we do every year. I think we do it twice per year. And one of the three things that were raised, so there was cash flow issues, there was shipping and wage and labor costs, and then the third issue was government bureaucracy. So one of the key action points to deal with that is to digitize the public service. Get services happening faster. Your passport, your driver's license. Well, in some countries, that happens in a day or two. I mean, that's literally you get it back in 48 hours. I know you can get same-day service. I have had same-day service. So why should it take 2 weeks or 2 months? We got to fix that.
Please tell me where you got yours.
Well, I can tell you it was in Grenada. I was born in Grenada. Yes. There's no reason why. I mean, the technology exists. A simple thing like that. So I'm saying, across the public service, our governments have to really commit now to digitize services to make it faster for our people to be served. It ought not, Lissa, to depend on who you know. And it certainly should not be based on any party affiliation. It has to be based on, I'm a Saint Lucian, I'm a citizen, I'm a resident, I'm entitled to a service, and frankly, in many cases, I might even be paying for the service. I expect to get it promptly. Those are things that we can fix with some technology and some leadership. And I know the government of Saint Lucia has some initiatives in that area, and I am just encouraging them to accelerate those initiatives.
What about stimulating the economy? I know that the traditional route is definitely to go via capital projects, infrastructure projects. Would that be your prescription, at least for us to be able to really get the local economy rolling through? But while doing that, there's also the public concern that capital projects may be competing against public support programs, because especially to the vulnerable, the unemployed. How do you see that scenario playing out?
You have to do both. It's not an either or. You have to do both. You have to do safety nets to take care of the vulnerable, but you also have to grow the productive sector. You have to invest such that the economy gets larger. More people find jobs. Government generates more revenue to then do other things. The government has to do something with St. Jude's. It has to do something with, it wants to do health insurance. It wants to do a number of things. Where is the money coming from? So you have to invest in the St. Lucian people and the economy to generate resources. If you do all safety nets, that's a problem, because you have no flows. Nothing is being generated to allow you to continue to support these safety nets. But at the same time, if you do only capital projects, then you have social pathologies emerging, social issues. So, and I know crime is of course an issue here, as it is in many of our countries. So I'm simply saying the government has to find that balance. It has to invest in the productive sectors, but it also has to maintain some safety nets. And in any design of any fiscal consolidation effort by the government of St. Lucia, you have to make sure that you protect safety nets. And that is something that I know the government would be focused on.
Now, the government requested debt relief from creditors, and that came under the G20 Debt Service Suspension Initiative. Can you explain to us how that is going to help ease the pressure?
Well, the idea was, in the pandemic, because of the shock, the great dislocation of our economies, economically and socially, that we be given some time to sort of use the limited resources that we have to invest in recovery and then to resume servicing. Unfortunately, that has been disappointing. I mean, the G20 has not really yielded any major benefits for us. I think one or two of the poorer countries in the region and certainly in other parts like Africa and so on may have benefited, but frankly spoken, in our region, we have not seen significant benefits. One of the challenges is, of course, we are deemed as middle income and in some cases high income. And therefore, for the creditors who are making these concessions, they are focused on the poorest countries. We are not the poorest countries in the world. We might be among the most vulnerable, but we're not the poorest. And that is why we continue to take issue with how these assessments are made. If you make it on per capita income, we will always get the raw end of the deal. If you consider vulnerability, then we will get a better and fairer assessment. And I want to just acknowledge at this time the work that the president of the CDB, Dr. Jean Leon, is doing to try to shine a light on this issue and to get a different calibration on the assessment, what he calls the vulnerability, the duration adjuster. His point basically, his argument thesis is, it takes longer for us to recover. So you're not just looking at the shock, but you have to look at how long it takes for us to recover. And when you put that into consideration, then we should have access to grants and concessional financing. So he's trying to make that case. He's been socializing the concept around the world, certainly in CDB, certainly at IMF, World Bank, and other places. And I know he's continued to make that effort to advocate for our region. So simply to say, the G20 call, we have not seen any real benefit for our region in that regard.
And we've been at it for a long time, asking for that revision on
we
how
have been.
Are we any closer to seeing some sort of end result?
Well, the one thing we have seen, which is new and which is an advance, is what the IMF announced recently. As you know, the managing director of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, was in Barbados last month. And Kristalina basically made the point that, well, she announced that they were able to get a facility called the Resilience and Sustainability Trust. It is the most concessional window ever developed by the IMF. 10.5 years grace period, 20 years to repay. And the important thing about this particular facility is that all Caribbean countries are eligible. Why is that significant? Because initially they were going to exclude those high-income and middle-income countries, the same issue. But on the grounds of vulnerability, a case was made, and I must say our governments lobbied very hard on the IMF and countries, the large countries, members of the IMF, to ensure we were included. And of course, people like Prime Minister Motley also championed that very hard. That facility now incorporates our vulnerability. That's a major development. So that's different from what we've seen in the past coming out of the IMF, for example. But we continue to make the case internationally for an appropriate treatment for our small states.
Right. Saint Lucia's VAT rate at 12.5%. We've heard persistently from Prime Minister Pierre that it is among the lowest, if not the lowest in the region. Of course, we know the resultant effect. Less revenue government is collecting from that mechanism. Should the VAT rate then be revised given the times that we're in?
I think it has to be looked at. It certainly is one of the lowest. I mean, most countries are at 15, some at 16, some even 17%. 12.5% is the lowest. But the tourism has always had a special rate. Some countries have it at 10%, maybe one or two at 8%. I think 10% in some countries. I think it has to be reviewed. The timing of the adjustment is to be looked at because, of course, we're in the middle of a challenge with inflation. So what is the right time to do that? But at the end of the day, you have to sustain yourself. I mean, you know, when you board an airplane and you are getting your instructions, they tell you in the event of an emergency, you have to put on your oxygen mask first, and then you help others nearby. The basic moral of that story, takeaway, is if the state is not in a position itself to take care of its basic operation, it can't help others. So you have to put your fiscal house in order. Whether that means raising revenue, cutting expenditure, or a combination of. And typically it's a combination that is required to get the appropriate adjustment. So I do think it needs to be reviewed and a determination made of what is the appropriate level. And if a determination is made to change it, what is the right time to make that change?
We hear you, Governor. We will take a very short break, and after the break, we'll be talking about the banking sector. Stay with us. Special conversation going on with the Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. He is Timothy Antoine.
Protect appliances from lightning, rain, and floodwater damage. Unplug them, then turn off the main switch. Lightning can produce electrical surges, which can damage equipment. Protect your electronics from water damage as well. Make sure you have flashlights, battery-powered radios, and extra fresh batteries available. Be smart, stay safe.
It's the power of going with Lucia.
Where most people see a window, we see a vision. We see the hours of development and testing, from the precision of craftsmen, quality of components, CNC processing to form immaculate all-glass products. The dedication of people who stand behind a product built to last a lifetime. And who knows, maybe after today, every time you look through one, you'll remember everything that went into it. St. Lou means windows, doors, and all-glass products and customization of modular products to suit your needs. Precision, quality, safety. They're your windows and your world. Call us today at 454-6538.
Nothing says how special your loved one is to you like a DBS love note. Wish someone a happy birthday. Let mom or dad know you care. Express admiration to your loved one, or congratulate someone on a special occasion. Say it all with a DBS love note, aired 3 times a day, 5:55 a.m., 1:30 p.m., and 10 p.m. However you choose to show your love to that special someone, do it with a DBS love note. Call 453-2705 for more information.
With the governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Timothy N.G. Antoine. Before we went to break, is indicating that we'll be discussing the banking sector. Hot button issue here in Saint Lucia, and I believe that it is across the ECCU as well. During a recent parliamentary sitting, Dr. Kenny Anthony, former Prime Minister, he was critical of the central bank for not doing enough to protect citizens from the actions of banks. Let's go to that insert from Dr. Anthony and then we'll take your reaction.
My problem with the central bank has always been its insensitivity to depositors at the banks. No one really seems to care what consumers endure and suffer at the hands of banks in Saint Lucia and in the region. And if I were to ask, Mr. Speaker, who has the power to inquire into the treatment of consumers and to prescribe regulatory behavior on the part of banks, I suspect that I will not get an answer to that question. Does the power reside in the individual ministers of finance to order inquiries into these matters, or does the power reside in the central bank? The fact of the matter is, when you look at the history of the central bank, it has never seemed to be seen, in my eyes, to be concerned about depositors. All it seemed to be concerned about is whether the books are healthy, whether the banks follow the guidelines issued by the central bank, whether they report to the bank, whether they are honest in what they report, and of course, whether they are maintaining the relevant balances that they are required to maintain. For example, your deposit ratios or your lending to deposit ratios. These are the things they get preoccupied with. But ask them, what are you doing to protect ordinary citizens? They can't tell you.
The Banking Act, and that sitting was held on July 12. Your reaction to that? Dr. Anthony believing that the ECCB is doing nothing to protect the ordinary citizens. You're really just concerned with the bottom line.
So let me start by acknowledging the contribution of Dr. Anthony, former Prime Minister of Saint Lucia, to the ECCU and particularly the Monetary Council. Dr. Anthony served as Finance Minister for, I think, about 14 years. And during that time, he chaired the Monetary Council at least, I believe, on 2 occasions. He also chaired in his latter years on the Council the Ministerial Subcommittee on Banking and played a very key role in helping the ECCB and our currency union in a difficult time, 2013, 2014, 2015, when there were some failed banks, that's well known in Anguilla and Antigua and Barbuda, and they had to be resolved. So I want to acknowledge the contribution of Dr. Anthony and thank him on behalf of even my predecessor, Sir Dwight, and on my own behalf for his stellar work over those years on the Monetary Council. I do want to say that the primary focus of the Eastern Caribbean is the protection of depositors. So all of these ratios and balances that he referred to that we seek, and we do seek those things, are pursuant to protecting depositors. Because Lisa, what does a depositor want to know more than anything else? Is my hard-earned money safe? not necessarily who owns the bank, what central bank is saying, what the manager is saying. Is my money safe? When I go to the bank, can I get my money when I want it? That's the first preoccupation of our depositors, and that's the first preoccupation of our central bank. So I want to be very clear. We do protect depositors, and that is the first and primary consideration. In addition to that, I think it needs to be made clear the reason why the ECCB is not addressing what is referred to as market conduct, or some people call consumer protection, is because the law does not give the ECCB permission to do that. And we need to be very clear. There's no ambiguity there. The law does not confer on the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, and by the law I mean the Banking Act, any authority to regulate fees and charges and to intervene and to mediate and to resolve conflicts amongst financial institutions and their customers, what we call market conduct. Let me just explain. In some parts of the world, you have a conduct authority. For example, in the United Kingdom, England, you have a financial conduct authority outside of the central bank to deal with issues like market conduct. Closer to home, in Jamaica, you have a financial ombudsman in the Bank of Jamaica, separate and apart from bank supervision, that deals with this issue of market conduct. Trinidad. So here's what we are doing. We agree that there needs to be a stronger framework to address market conduct issues. So the concerns that Dr. Anthony raised is legitimate. The question is, how is it to be done? We have to be empowered in law. We are now working on a proposal to the Monetary Council. We started that work about 2 years ago, called the Optimal Regulatory Framework. Inclusive in that is a proposal for a financial ombudsman, possibly to sit in the ECCB, but to be separate from the people who supervise banks, because there's a conflict there, a conflict of interest, if you are supervising banks and at the same time dealing with issues that arise in terms of these relationships. So we will have some suggestions, recommendations shortly in respect of that matter, but I want to be very clear. There's no dereliction of duty. The ECCB cannot do what the law does not empower it to do. And at the moment, so for example, let me close with that. On fees and charges, what does the law allow us to do right now? We can ask a bank, a licensee, have you published your fees? Have you notified customers? And the law says you have to give at least 30 days if you're going to change the fees. But nowhere in the law does it give the ECB permission to say yea or nay. We neither approve nor disapprove or deny fees. That is not allowed in the law. So clearly, we have to address that issue. And we propose to bring some recommendations around this issue of market conduct.
Now,
so stay tuned.
And we are stay tuned, because I can tell you people are just eagerly awaiting, because we want to be able to feel like the ECCB is there for us in all ways possible. Prime Minister Pierre also had a reaction when he presented the bill for the amendments to the Banking Act. He, in a nutshell, really sort of said, well, whatever we are doing, the amendments to the Act, whether it is palatable to the public or not, we are in effect forced to do so in order for there to be the harmonization in the banking sector. When these sentiments, and I'm thinking that perhaps it does not lend well to the public understanding of what the ECCB is trying to do with the banking sector. Because if governments feel that they are forced to go along with this, how does that make what you do easier for the public to receive?
Well, I think we have
because we're thinking that all of this oversight that the bank wants to have is really about control and taking out, as Dr. Anthony said, that sort of the human element to banking.
So I think we have to go back to what it is that the government set up almost 40 years ago with the central bank. October 1983, he set up the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. In that agreement, the ECCB agreement, which is in law in all 8 of our member countries, the ECCB has been identified as a monetary authority for all 8 countries. And I think you will agree with me that the central bank has served this region extremely well. Where would we be without the ECCB? Could you imagine if every country had their own central bank? You imagine what that might look like? I don't think we want to even contemplate what that might look like. So, in making the decision to vest that authority in the ECCB, what we basically have done in law, well before my time, well before your time, is create a single banking space. Single law, single regulator, which is the ECCB. That requires consistent, uniform legislation. If not, what happens in one country is going to be different from another country. And then you will have breakdown in the system. The chain is as strong as its weakest link. So you can't have in a financial system, with respect, one provision in this country, another provision in that country. And then if you look at it from a business perspective, if every time you go in a country you have to read a new law, you have to hire a lawyer to interpret the law before you could do business, how difficult will it be? It will be difficult to do business in the region. So I want to be very clear. A single space means single law, single regulator. The way we do legislation is that we draft in consultation with the countries. The attorneys general, the chief parliamentary council, the drafts people. We go back and forth, we eventually take it to the monetary council. So these laws are not generated by the ECCB in a vacuum, but they are there for the benefit of the people of the currency union. And so that is authority that parliaments have given the ECCB to help the people of the ECCU. So it is not, I don't think it is fair to say, well, it's forced on the countries. The countries have imposed that authority in the ECCB on their behalf. We work for the governments. We work for the countries. So I think we just have to clarify the role of the central bank and what we're trying to do. But if we start changing the laws, we're going to create problems for the very people in our countries that we're trying to protect. And I don't think our politicians want to do that. So we have to be very clear about financial sector regulation.
I was very surprised to find out that within the ECCU we are overbanked. I think there were some statistics showing that there are 3 banks for every 100,000 persons in the ECCU. And then we've been seeing lots of movement happening with the banking sector across the ECCU. There have been some consolidation, some amalgamation happening. How do you see that benefiting consumers, customers, and how does that fare for the banking sector itself? Because we are seeing a rise of national banks.
We are. The banking landscape has changed dramatically in recent years as the Canadian banks have exited and our indigenous banks have bought these Canadian operations. The reality is today, indigenous banks control 2/3 of all the banking assets in the ECCU. We've just announced the approval of sale of FCIB operations in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and St. Kitts, and that will take it to, I think, 68%. For us, we want to make sure that there is competition in banking, in the financial sector. And that means you want to have choice. 2 or 3, ideally, to be able to give customers choice. But what we also have to acknowledge is that we are small countries. Banking is very expensive business. The compliance costs, the impositions by the Financial Action Task Force. So when people complain about these 2 pieces of ID and this source of funds declaration and all of that, where are those things coming from? Not from the ECCB. They're coming from the Financial Action Task Force. Some of them, not all of them, some of them, to protect against money laundering. It is very costly for a bank an indigenous bank to bear all of those costs. You see, the difference between our indigenous banks and, say, the Scotias of this world is that Scotia was spread over 19, 20 countries. So the unit cost of operation was a lot lower. Hence, the profitability was a lot higher. But if you have to bear some of these same costs spread over 1 or 2 or 3 branches in a country, it's very, very costly for banking. And that's something the public doesn't appreciate. All of the digital tools, cybersecurity, because as you go digital, you have to provide for cybersecurity, insurance, all these are costs. And then when you have non-performing loans as high as they are in some countries, that is why I'm not making any excuses for banks, but I will tell you that is partly why you see fees and charges increasing. Because what they're trying to do is make up for income that they're not getting from interest income because of bad loans. Some of our countries, you have bad loans 15, 20%. The international benchmark is 5%. Non-performing loans, bad loans. So I'm saying that to say, fundamentally, we want competition in the banking system. We want multiple banks so that people have choice and that the banks know they have to keep each other on their toes. And I will tell you, that has redounded to the benefit of our people. If you look at mortgage rates in the ECCU, a decade ago, maybe 15 years ago, mortgages were 10%, maybe even higher. Today you can get a mortgage for 6%, maybe even 5%. That is close to what you get in the United States right now. By the way, the rates are going up in the United States. They're not going up in the ECCU. Thank God for that. Because as the Fed raises the rate in the U.S., mortgage rates are actually rising in the U.S. Mortgage rates are not rising here. But what drove mortgage rates down in the ECCU, in Saint Lucia, was competition amongst the banks. So we believe that that is important, and we want to see that. But we do have to understand, banking is very expensive business, and we are small countries.
You mentioned the non-performing loans, and the loan ratio increased marginally. At the end of the council meeting, it was reported that we had 11.8% and above the 5.0% regulatory minimum requirement, as you just alluded to there. So then how does the ECCB plan to address this? Because, as you mentioned, non-performing loans, it's a drag on the banking sector, a drag for fiscal stability within the ECCU. So what is the plan from the ECCB on how you will try to mitigate this?
There are several tools that we're pursuing. One is that we set up in 2017 an entity by the governments called the Eastern Caribbean Asset Management Corporation. It's based in Antigua and Barbuda. It serves all our member countries. And that entity is intended to buy bad loans. The benefit of that is, if a bank is carrying a bad loan, it is not only reducing its income, but it's also reducing its appetite to lend money, because it's been hurt and it's carrying these impaired assets or distressed assets. Well, they're both impaired and distressed. Now, once you sell it, you get money from the sale. The bank can then make that money available as fresh credit in the economy to businesses, to households. So you want to have some of those loans purchased. So that is one tool. And they can use the private sector as well. So there are private sector operators who also buy bad loans, and I know some of those have been pursued in some of our countries. The second thing that we also have to look at is a credit bureau. And a credit bureau has a benefit both ways. It can help with better credit underwriting. And it works to help give more access to credit for people who need access to credit. In a lot of cases, we have small people who just don't have a credit score or a credit history. They actually pay their loans. They do better than some big clients. But the reality is that they don't know the right people. They know. So as a result of that, they're not benefiting from credit. They need to pursue their dreams. They need access to credit. So the credit bureau will help them to do that. It will also help the banks to make better decisions about what kind of credit to issue. Because it is true that sometimes the banks have made poor decisions in terms of what they lend and how much they lend. So the credit bureau will help the borrowers, and it will also help the lenders. And what we know for a fact, Lisa, is that everywhere credit bureaus are established, credit increases. Right now, the Saint Lucian government is pursuing the youth economy.
Yes.
To pursue the youth economy, you have to make credit available to young entrepreneurs. That's how they're going to be able to pursue their dreams. Some of it will be grand, but in some cases, they have a good business idea, they need access to credit. We have to provide that. And the credit bureau will help. One other thing I'd mention is the partial credit guarantee scheme, which is intended to guarantee 75% of loans, up to, I believe, $700,000. This is a new product launched in October of 2020, and working capital, startup capital, classic guarantees, intended to help small businesses, women, creatives. That is so while we are addressing the issue of bad loans, we also have to look to bring fresh credit to help the economy recover and grow. And those are initiatives that the ECCB has piloted, and we are strongly advancing.
Still dealing with the financial sector, credit unions, national banks are important. Credit unions have a very, very special place within the financial sector. Let's listen to Dr. Kenny Anthony again from that July 12th sitting when he made reference to the relationship that the ECCB is now pursuing with credit unions. Let's go to that clip.
The central bank now is hungry going after the credit unions. When I was in office, Mr. Speaker, they tried it. I've seen the legislation they have introduced. A lot of people don't know that the cooperative legislation that exists in this country, I'm the one who drafted it, you know. That cooperative legislation that you see empowering credit unions, I'm the one who drafted it. I drafted it for Saint Lucia when I was KVIL at the University of West Indies, so I know it inside out. But what they're trying to do now is to replace it, to ensure that they diminish the independence of these credit unions and to place them under regulatory control of the central bank, because they claim that these credit unions are now havens for money laundering. But when the time comes, I'm going to urge the House to do its best to protect the independence of these credit unions. And the other reason for that, of course, is to provide St. Lucians with additional opportunities for banking services, which the traditional banks no longer provide. Because these traditional banks have no room for poor people again, you know.
Dr. Kenny Anthony there, and I think that what he has said represents pretty much on the ground a fear amongst the public that once the ECCB or the credit unions become fully entrenched under the ECCB, the umbrella of the ECCB, that perhaps the sort of service and treatment that they receive there, that human element again that credit unions provide, would be eroded. What say you?
Well, I'm a little confused, to be quite blunt, because my experience, I've been in the office now for 6.5 years. My experience is that we have a very good relationship with credit unions. We are not fighting with our credit unions. The credit unions have come to us, and of course they found in us and in me a listening ear and a very open line to communicate and to engage. And in this period, we've signed the ECCB an MOU with the CCCU, the Caribbean Confederation of Credit Unions. We have agreed to cooperate in several areas. A couple quick examples. So, under the Banking Act and on our automated clearinghouse, only banks are allowed to use the clearance to do checks and to clear amongst each other. That has always been the case. The credit union came and said to us, we would like to have access to the clearance. We said, we agree that that request is a legitimate request. We then prepared a change of the rules, which I signed and sent to our governments and asked them to gazette, to make it official, to enact it into law. Saint Lucia has passed that, and I want to thank the government of Saint Lucia for doing that. So 4 countries have already done that, and we are expecting the others will do that shortly. We have to finalize what the rules of engagement will be, but the first step was to change the law to actually allow credit unions access to the clearance. We've done that. Secondly, some credit unions have said to us, we want to be able to buy cash directly from you, not go through a commercial bank. we've said to them, yes, we have facilitated that request. So in a couple of cases, we have facilitated on request, and we are open to do it for other credit unions. Credit unions have said to us, we want to be part of the credit bureau. And we have said, yes, we are prepared to give you access and to engage you early as we roll out the credit bureau, which we are planning to launch later this year. Credit unions have asked us to collaborate on DCash. Have said they are willing to partner. And JANU, for example, is a partner. Others are in Grenada, Riser, other communal are on board or coming on board. So in practical terms, we have a good working relationship with the credit unions. I know that there are fears in some quarters that perhaps the ECCB will regulate the credit unions. We have made no such decision. We have not made such a decision. Whether, in fact, that's a decision that gets made, I don't know. The reality is that we have to figure out, and this has to be a very honest conversation. I believe credit unions are a force for good. I've said so publicly, and I say that privately. I have been a member of a credit union, 2 credit unions, in fact, for years. I mean, when I say years, 20, 30 years. And I do believe that the credit unions have a very important role to play. So the real question is, how can we facilitate them? Now, as they get bigger and bigger in size and scope, the question then becomes, do we have the requisite oversight? Credit unions are regulated right now. The only question is whether, as they take over more and more of the financial system, whether the safeguards are appropriate, fit for purpose. There's minor league and there's big league. There's Bush League and there's the Premier League. If in the Premier League, the officiating tends to be a little higher than in the Bush League, yes?
Yes?
Right. So those are the discussions we need to have, and we need to be honest with those. I don't think it's helpful to take the position that somebody trying to control credit unions and fight them down and sort of neuter them or neutralize them, that is far from the truth. What has happened, and we have to be very clear-eyed about that, as our indigenous banks have taken more of what the Canadian banks used to do, the credit unions are taking more of what the indigenous banks used to do. It's a change in the system. But to whom much is given, much is required. And I will simply say, let us have an honest conversation, not based on fear, not based on suspicion. Judge us on our track record. What has the ECCB done for credit unions since, let's say in my tenure? I'll confine it to my tenure because I can speak to that. And what you will find is a track record of cooperation and mutual respect. We meet with credit unions from time to time. They come to us with issues, and they've always found in us an open door. Let us not stir up and create a type of narrative that somehow suggests the central bank wants to kind of fight with or control credit unions. Let us work together, and that's what I will ask of everyone.
Right. Special conversation happening there with the governor of the ECCB. We'll take a very short break. On the other side, we're inviting you to make those calls, post your questions or comments, and I'd be happy to pose them to the governor. Stay with us. We're back after the break.
For more than 50 years, we have worked farm and land to bring out the best of nature. When the harvest season is ripe with wholesome fruit, and the new day is full of fresh milk, we collect. It's the product of the hard work and dedication of those who love what they do. And we never let go of that passion and commitment. We turn it into something even greater. Something we can share with the world. Something we can bring to your table. The best from our land, direct to your home. RICA, a quality heritage.
One thing, we love plenty gal thing.
every day we snow 10 say boom.
Yo, this is Skinny Fabulous, and I'm inviting you to be ready this carnival season with Courts Ready Cash. Get up to $20,000 cash right now. No deposit needed, and it's completely hassle-free. You will have your money in your hand in less than 24 hours. What are you waiting for? Don't miss the vibes this carnival season. It's all about Courts Ready Cash. Ready when you are.
Thinking bad, all my friend them stinking mad. We be up and drinking bad. Martin call me the drinking god.
At La Place Salazon, the price is always right and you can't go wrong. Because if it's meats you crave, La Place Salazon has it. Need turkey, oxtail, or trotters? La Place Salazon. Feeling for lamb, goat, chicken burgers, or tenders? La Place Salazon. A variety of meats just for you to choose from, including bacon, cheese, pepperoni, ham, eggs, and more for breakfast. All at La Place Salazon. For all your salted meats and ground meat, beef, chicken, pork, and turkey, La Place Salazon. What about cow heel, pork, and chicken? La Place Salazon, La Place Salazon, La Place Salazon. Now for your fish. Head to La Place Salazon, Grosley. Visit our island-wide locations in Castries, Villefort, Soufrière, and Grosley. So, who needs meat? La Place Salazon, where the price is always right. They have meat.
Do you need television airtime? Are you spending more than you planned or getting poor results because your ad dollar did not go very far? Advertising with DBS, the #1 station, allows you to set your budget and get targeted airtime to fit your business and your customers. Plus, targeted airtime gets you the most for your advertising dollar. Don't scatter your TV advertising budget. Target your ads. Your customers are watching. Call DBS at 453-2705 and let's talk. And thank you for staying with us. Conversation with the governor of the ECCB. Time now for you to place your calls. We'll be happy to hear from you. The governor wants to be able to interact with you. The telephone number for you to call, the landline, is 451-9788. That's 451-9788. There's also the WhatsApp. You can do that at 723-3333. Again, 723-3333. You can also post your question, comment on Facebook. We'll be happy to post it to the governor as well. Dcash, Governor, it is part of the overall plan. It's sort of the transformation of the ECCB and, by effect, transforming the financial landscape for the ECCU. Second phase has already been launched. Tell us how that is going, and at full implementation, what would Dcash look like?
Right, so thank you very much for the question. As you probably know, and I'll just confirm, we did launch Dcash in March 2021 in the middle of a pandemic, first monetary union in the world to launch a digital currency. And we now have launched it in all 8 member countries. Anguilla was the last country in to do that. We did that at the end of June. So now the next step is to really market Dcash. Something we haven't done a whole lot of, to be honest. We are bringing a partner on board to assist us with that. And so the public could expect in the next few months to see significant marketing around Dcash, what it offers, and how it can be used. I'm told we have a call.
We have a call,
so let's pause.
Yes, so let's say good evening to the caller. Thank you so much. What's your comment or question, please?
Good evening, Lissa, and good evening to the governor.
Good evening.
In 2018, I went to one of the banking institutions, Fiscal International Bank. I made a money transfer to make a purchase on a home item. When I left the country, I went to New York to find out what was their status with the purchase. They said to me, the money never got the money, the wire transfer. 2 days later, I came back and I went to the bank to try to ask what happened to the money transfer I made. They said to me they were going to look into it. It's 4 years now, and I cannot get any headway as to what happened to my money. You used a term earlier, I think you said market behavior. If I'm correct, you said
market conduct.
Market conduct. You said that the ECCB cannot stick to market conduct, cannot regulate, cannot, if I listen it correctly. But in my particular case, I feel that if the bank could just give me the corresponding bank they dealt with, they said to me that they keep sending an email asking the corresponding bank for information. Why can I not get that? Let me do my own investigation. And I just feel to myself that particular bank is behaving like a vampire. It's just sucking the blood of the poor. That is how I feel in Saint Lucia. I feel when you go to this bank and something goes wrong with your money, there is no way they can stick with you. Okay, I wired $40,000. That money gets lost. Was my money insured? I paid them a fee to wire the money. If the money was not insured, why wasn't it insured? So I'm going to end it here and listen to how you feel I can get help to try to recover past or what could happen in the future so somebody else doesn't get burned like me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Governor.
Yes, sir. I really, I feel your pain. What you describe is upsetting. I obviously do not know the particulars about that situation, but clearly, you deserve to be treated better. What I would recommend you do is to take your complaint to the Ministry of Consumer Affairs and have them formally write to the bank in question to get some answers for this particular situation. So that at least we could get to the bottom of this issue and it could be resolved, hopefully, to your satisfaction. But what you describe is something that I'm not happy to hear, and I don't think that's how customers ought to be treated. Now, as I said, I do not have all the particulars, and I think once the bank has an opportunity to respond, perhaps those issues can be properly resolved. So that would be my advice to you at the moment. When we finally set up the financial ombudsman, then the ombudsman could deal with something like that. But right now, we do not have in law the ability to directly intervene. So we may call a bank and ask a question, but there's nothing in the law that we can enforce or insist on them taking the requisite action.
We go back to the phone lines and say good evening to you. What's your question or comment for the governor?
Yes, hi. Good evening to the governor.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Yeah. Concerning your CBDC, a few questions. In order for digital cash to work, cash, as we know it, will no longer be king. True or not?
Cash will always be king, but cash could take two forms. It can be physical and it can be digital. And I think that's the point we want to keep making. When we talk about Dcash, it is cash. The only difference is that it's on your phone, not in your pocket. So if you forget it, not a problem. And you don't have to carry large wads of cash and become a target for robberies. So cash, I believe, will continue to be king. Right? It is cash. It's just a digital form. Keep that in mind. It is digital cash. It is still cash.
In its digital form,
yes.
Would it act the same way as cash? Because when you have cash in your pocket, you have privacy. What you buy is your business.
Yes.
When it's on a phone, it's on a blockchain technology. It's registered.
Yes.
The government can know what you purchase. There's no more privacy.
So
it cannot serve as cash, because cash is king, because you could put cash underneath your mattress if you want. With Gcash, you cannot do that, right?
Right. So good question. Very good question. And let me just say the following. With physical cash, you have complete anonymity. So you're correct. Nobody knows exactly. Right. With Dcash, it is managed anonymity. there is privacy. The government does not know what you're buying or what you're selling with the cash. It is registered on the blockchain, to be correct. And if for whatever reason a transaction is suspicious, then it can be traced. And I've always been very clear about that. But in your day-to-day operations, when you use the cash, it's a code. Nobody knows. I don't know what you've purchased. The government does not know what you purchased. I use the cash. When I use the cash, nobody knows what I'm purchasing except the person who I buy it from, as you would with your physical cash. So I just want to be clear. While it's not exactly the same, and you're correct, it is close. One is complete anonymity, the other is managed anonymity. And we have to be clear. And the reason why it is managed anonymity is because we have to avoid any suggestion that Dcash could be used for money laundering. And we've been very clear to set it up in such a way that it can stand scrutiny from any international agency for money laundering and terrorist financing. And we are very comfortable that we have done that with the design.
Okay, another question, your last question. Digital currency can be programmable. Is that a reality?
No, when you say programmable, I don't understand. It is on the blockchain where it is stored. So it's stored there. Okay, you use your phone to change.
Let me give you an example. So
yes,
China, right now, you have a social credit system, right?
Yes.
And at the end of the day, people have money on their phone. They go everywhere. They don't carry cash anymore.
Correct.
India, some of these countries, they already transfer the currencies to digital currency. The people lost a lot of money, but they managed to transition. However, people are finding out, especially in places like China, if you stand against the government, let's say a protest, let's say you say something negative, or in some way you criticize, or you don't want to follow a protocol, you don't want to take a vaccine, these people are finding themselves being locked out of their system, so they cannot transact like they normally can. And for a lot of us in the Caribbean, some people might want to call it conspiracy, but this is something out of the book of Revelation, where people will not be able to buy or sell without an ID, whether it be a digital ID, whether it be digital currency, whatever, because all of these things are basically building blocks to a control system. All right, I'll listen off it.
Right, so let me just be clear. I'm a man of faith. I'm not ashamed of my faith. I've never been, never will be. And I have no difficulty in promoting digital currency. It is not inconsistent with my faith. I don't perhaps have time to go down that in any detail tonight. But let me just say two things. One is that I think you have to look at the system. Hey, look, we're in the Caribbean. Look at how quickly we transfer power. Elections the next day, change our government, change a thing. No fighting, no fussing. New prime minister is sworn in, and we move it along. I have no evidence that somebody is going to, because look at with the vaccine. Some people took it, some people didn't take it. We continue to move forward. So I'm not sure the fears that you mentioned in other parts of the world are realized, are relevant here. I mean, I hear you, but I'm not worried about that, and I don't think you should be.
Let's go back to the phone line.
One other quick thing. When you said people lost money in India, I want to make sure people are very clear. They did not lose money in India because of digitization. The government took a decision to remove large denominations, physical denominations, from the system because there was a lot of money laundering. And clearly, some of the people who had monies under the mattress from illegal activities could not bring those monies forward. There were other hiccups, but I want to be very clear. People didn't lose money because they digitized. Let's just be very clear about that. Let's go back to the phone lines.
Let's go back to the phone lines. Thank you so much. What's your question, comment, please? Good evening. Are you on?
Hello.
Hi, good evening to you. What's your question, comment, quickly, please?
Good night, Governor.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, I just want some clarification there in terms of what is the difference between the cash and having a credit card?
So, with a credit card, it's you're borrowing money, which you have to pay back. Typically, the interest rate might be 18% or even higher. It's a loan. It's a credit card, with a credit card. With Dcash, it is basically your money. I don't even want to say it's a debit card because, well, you could say it's a debit card. It's your money. You have to have the money in the wallet to transact. It is the ease of payment. some weeks ago, I was cycling with my two daughters. They wanted something to eat after cycling. I could use my phone. I ought to be able to use my phone to do that. I shouldn't have to have a wallet, a physical wallet. I had my phone with me. I should be able to buy a meal for them, a pizza or whatever they want with my phone. So it is basically your money on using your smartphone. Everybody has a phone, mostly everybody, to allow you to transact business. It is not a credit card because it's not a loan. It's basically your money. So what you basically can do, you have money in a credit union or a bank, you put some on your wallet, your phone, and you transact. If you, for whatever reason, need to take that money back out in physical form, you cash out. We have an arrangement for you to do that. So you can move from digital to physical and back, not a problem. But it is your money. Listen, we have a crime issue in the region. I want to make sure that anybody who wants to go to sit down at a bar in the evening, 9, 10 in the evening, can do so comfortable that they don't have to walk with a set of cash and make themselves the potential target of some kind of crime. So you have to be able to use your phone to do that, and the proprietor, the owner of the bar or the shop, ought to be able to transact so that they're not a target, you're not a target. The clients are safe and the business is safer. That is an example of how Dcash can help us in this situation where we're fighting crime. Just a simple example.
My understanding of both is this, and you don't have any cash physically with you.
No, it's on the phone. The value is on the phone, so you don't have to physically. So if you forget, or you just didn't have time to go to the ATM, or you want to avoid the charges of the ATM, that's fine. Dcash is free. It's faster, it's safer, it's cheaper. So what I'm saying to you, sir, try it. You have nothing to lose. You can't lose the money, because even if you lose your phone, the value is stored on the blockchain, so you're not losing your money. And we've explained that, and we can continue to break that down for anybody who wants to. So give it a shot.
Thank you very much. And as we begin to wind down, Governor, thank you very much, caller, for that. Two inquiries there. One individual online wanted to know about where does the ECCB stand on the cryptocurrency, and then we also have an individual who's saying that banks in Saint Lucia blocking locals from investing their own cash on the international market, saying that they've been unable to use their debit card to purchase crypto.
Cryptos. I wish we had time. So there are about 10,000 cryptocurrencies in the world. Dcash is not a cryptocurrency. I want to be very clear. We don't have time to go into the definitions tonight. Digital cash, Dcash, is a digital currency with the full faith and backing of the central bank. It has the same value as the $20 note you have in your wallet or in your purse, backed by the ECCB. With the cryptos, they're not backed by anything. It's speculation, buying and selling. Price is up today, the price is down tomorrow. Because there are so many, because fundamentally they do not have an underlying asset, because they're not regulated, there will be a crackdown. I'm telling you, there will be a crackdown on cryptocurrencies. And many of these cryptocurrencies will not survive. I'm telling you. Which ones will? I don't know. If I knew, well, obviously, I don't. The reason why there's going to be a crackdown is because many of these cryptocurrencies are being used for money laundering and in some cases terrorist financing. You're going to see the major central banks and the major banks around the world crack down on those. I say to people all the time, including people in my church sometimes who come to me asking me what should they do, or in many cases they've already invested but they want an opinion from me. Can you afford to lose this money? What do you know about cryptocurrencies? Is it regulated? If you have a dispute, who do you go to? Very often, the answer is they don't know or no. I say to them, if after you've answered all of these questions, you still want to do it, go right ahead. But understand you could lose this money. You might make some money, but you have the risk of losing. Don't ever borrow money to invest in cryptos, because you are not sure whether you will recover that investment, and you're going to have to pay back that debt. Do not ever borrow. If you want to speculate with a small amount, and you feel like doing that, and you could afford to lose the money, that is your choice. So what we've said several times, and we've put out advisories on that, is to be careful, because we don't want people to get hurt. Now, I don't know the particular circumstance where a bank is denying you purchase of cryptos. I am not aware of that. Maybe the bank, if that is true, the banks have determined that they don't want you to get hurt. But obviously, or it may be that the bank is concerned about being involved in money laundering. I'm not sure. But I'm saying to you, I cannot speak with any definitive comment on this latter point, because I'm not aware of that situation.
All right, we will go back to the phone lines. Thank you so much. What's your question, comment, please, quickly?
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, I would like to find out from you whether you all know about the yen currency, which is due to launch shortly. I have not heard anything about that.
Well, I'm not sure, caller, if you're referring to the Chinese digital currency. The Chinese had made
not yen, Y-E-N, your everyday money.
Y-E-N?
Y-E-M, yeah, they're due to launch shortly.
No, I'm not. No, I can't offer you any comment on that. I do not know.
Oh, well,
Sorry.
yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, well, yeah.
I'm going to check it out, but I do not know.
Okay, so I cannot direct that question to the panel.
Well, I don't know if Lisa has a comment, but I don't.
No,
Sorry.
You are so better suited than I am.
I want to ask the governor that question.
I'm going to have to go and do my homework on that one. I do not know the answer to that.
No, what I'm asking is the panel, the governor, would he be able to answer that?
Well, I am speaking to you. I am governor.
Oh, okay.
And I do not know the answer.
Oh, okay then, right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for that. We give you opportunity for one final call. If we get that call within the next few seconds. But Governor, while we await that, as we winding down, talk to us about the callers come through. Thank you. Go ahead. What's your question, comment?
Okay, I was registered for Zcash sometime last year, September. Right? So I know it's working. I had somebody transfer some money to my wallet. All right? But I did this thing via the app through the ECCB. And I've tried to get one or two of the financial institutions, namely Bank of Saint Lucia as well as First National Bank, and they had difficulty in me signing on to them actually using my account so I could transfer money into my wallet. And they have not been able to sort it out, and I don't know what's the reason for that.
If you can send me your contacts at info@ECCB. Well, you can send it at governor@ECCB-org. I can have one of my colleagues check, because just to explain to people, what I think you're saying is that you got a value-based wallet initially, but you now want a registered base wallet using either Bank of Saint Lucia or First National.
Yeah,
but so it's easier, because that's what I have. I have a registered base wallet. I use one of my banks. So I think we can sort that out with somebody can look into that for you. So if we could get your information, we will have somebody touch base with you on that.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. And you see, Governor, you have been of tremendous assistance already to the public of Saint Lucia.
We're here to serve.
Yeah, we're here to serve. Yes. As we close, Governor, just want to ask you, given all that we have said for this evening, what sort of leadership is needed right now across the ECCU?
Forward-looking, forward-leaning, inclusive, bold, decisive leadership. Forward-looking, forward-leaning, inclusive, bold, decisive leadership. And that's at the level of governments, but also at the level of institutions like the ECCB, and at the level of our citizens and residents. All of us have to lean in, lean forward, and hold hands to navigate this period and to transform the region.
Okay, I think, Governor, it seems like people don't want you to leave. Let me just see if we could perhaps get one other question in for you. Just one very, very quickly. And someone wanted to know about Bitcoin. But perhaps you don't have time to get through in that. But the Republic Bank was the only bank in the Caribbean. One individual is saying that processed cryptocurrency and they've blocked it permanently. That was just a comment from someone there on the crypto. But Governor, it would seem that there's great interest from the public in this whole transformation. How are we going to move forward with what our financial sector looks like for the future? It's coming, it's happening. It is coming. And so the mindset that we would need for us to be able to embrace that change, I know you said that the Dcash, lots of public education and awareness is needed from the ECCB level. On the home front, how can other institutions get involved in being able to move that public sensitization along?
I think you just have to start with our mindset. We need a growth mindset. A growth mindset simply is a reframing of our problems as opportunities. We have a choice. Do we curse the darkness or light a candle? Every single time we at the ECCB strive to light a candle. And I would say, and I would encourage everyone to do the same. So to me, Lisa, it starts with that growth mindset. The threats that we face right now present opportunities. Are we prepared to seize them? It means we have to make some bold decisions. We have to do a few things differently. Are we prepared to do that? But muddling through is not an option. We have to go brave, we have to go bold, and it has to be our transformation. And that is what ECCB is committed to doing with our member countries and, of course, our governments and the people of the region.
Governor, I want to thank you so much. I know it has been a very long day for you and you've championed all the way through. Thank you so much for making the time for you to come and sit and interact with the public of Saint Lucia. We hope to see you sometime very soon. Don't be a stranger now.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to serve, and I want to thank the government and people of St. Lucia for their hospitality and for the frank conversations we've had this week. We are encouraged. We will continue to work hard for you.
And thank you very much for your participation, for viewing, for your comments and question online and directed via the phone line. I'm Lissa Joseph. This has been a special conversation with the Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Mr. Timothy N.J. Antoine. Good night.
You're watching DBS.